Me husband told me he wanted a divorce on the same night I'd made his favorite meal, pot roast. 41 years of marriage, and he sat across that table like a man reading a weather report. I'm keeping the house, the accounts, the lake property. You can have your clothes and whatever's in the china cabinet. My attorney called me the next morning screaming, "Fight him, Evelyn! Fight everything!" But I didn't say a word. I just nodded and let him think he'd already won. He was still smiling 3 weeks later when the knock came at his office door. "Good evening, dear listeners. This is Hannah. Pull up a chair and stay with me tonight, because this one took me a long time to be ready to tell. Please like this video if it speaks to you, and drop a comment letting me know which city you're listening from. I want to know how far these words travel. I was 63 years old when my husband of 41 years decided he was done with me. Not done with the life we'd built, mind you. Just done with me. His name is Warren. He's 70 years old. Tall, still handsome in the way that men his age sometimes are, silver-haired, confident, the kind of man who walks into a room and expects it to rearrange itself around him. For 41 years, I thought that confidence was attractive. Turned out it was just selfishness wearing a nice suit. We met in Chattanooga, Tennessee, at a church picnic in the summer of 1983. I was 22, freshly graduated, working as a bookkeeper for a small medical practice. He was 29, already climbing inside a commercial real estate firm, already sure of everything. He proposed 6 months later. My mother said he was too sure of himself. I told her that was a good quality in a husband. I spent 41 years finding out she was right. We had 2 children. Our daughter Carol lives in Nashville now with her family. Our son James is in Phoenix finishing his 2nd decade in the military. I raised them mostly while Warren traveled for work. Deals in Atlanta, developments in Charlotte, properties up and down the Tennessee River corridor. I cooked the dinners. I went to the school plays alone. I held our son's hand at the emergency room at 2 in the morning when he broke his collarbone falling out of a tree because Warren was in Knoxville closing something that couldn't wait. I also kept the books. That's the part Warren forgot about. Or maybe he never thought it mattered. I'd stopped working when Carol was born at his request because we'd agreed one of us should be home. But bookkeeping doesn't leave you. Numbers stay in your body the way certain smells do. I managed everything. Our household accounts, our insurance, the property taxes, the investments, the college funds. Warren handled his business accounts, and I handled the rest. We had what I thought was a system built on trust. The first thing I noticed wrong was in January. 2 years before the divorce conversation, though I didn't know that's what it was building toward. We have a savings account I'd been adding to for years. Small amounts here and there, money I'd redirected from the household budget. Nothing deceptive, just responsible. A woman's emergency fund, the kind your grandmother told you to keep. I checked it one Thursday morning and found it $3,000 lighter than my last entry. When I asked Warren, he said he'd moved it to cover a business shortfall, temporarily. He said, temporarily, the way people say it when they have no intention of following through. I wrote it down in my notebook. I keep a notebook, always have. The second thing I noticed was the phone. Warren had always kept a work phone separate from his personal one. That was nothing new. But in February, he started leaving both of them face down when he came home. Small thing, the kind of thing you tell yourself means nothing. I told myself it meant nothing for about 6 weeks before I stopped believing it. By March, there were charges on our joint credit card I didn't recognize. A florist in a neighborhood on the other side of Chattanooga. A restaurant I'd never heard of twice in 1 week. Spa services. I am not a suspicious woman by nature. I am a methodical one. I wrote those down too. The conversation happened on a Wednesday night in April. He'd come home late, which wasn't unusual, but something about the way he walked in was different, deliberate, rehearsed. He sat down at the kitchen table while I was finishing the dishes and said, without any particular emotion, "I think it's time we talked about separating." I turned the faucet off. I didn't turn around right away. I stood there with my hands still wet over the sink, looking at the window above it, at the dark backyard where I'd planted a magnolia tree the year Carol was born. That tree was 40 feet tall now. When I turned around, he was looking at the table. "How long have you been thinking about this?" I asked. "A while," he said. "Is there someone else?" A pause that lasted exactly long enough to be an answer. That's not what this is about. I sat down across from him. 41 years, and the man couldn't look me in the eye. He had a plan, he said. He'd already spoken to an attorney. He was prepared to be fair. The house, our home in Lookout Valley, the one I painted and gardened and made into the place our grandchildren called Grandma's house, was in his name. So was the lake property in Meigs County. The investment accounts were under his Social Security number. The retirement funds were his through his firm. I'm willing to give you a monthly amount, he said, enough to rent something modest. And you can keep your car. He said modest, like he was doing me a favor. I'll need time to look this over, I said. Of course. He nodded, relieved. He'd expected tears, probably. Maybe anger. He got neither, and that made him uneasy. Good. I've had papers drawn up. Take a week. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark with my notebook open in front of me and a cup of tea that went cold. I added up what I knew. 41 years, 2 children raised, a household run like a business, efficiently, lovingly, with attention to every detail Warren had never bothered to notice. And according to the legal documents he'd had prepared, I was worth approximately the value of a used Buick. I thought about fear. I sat with it deliberately, the way you have to sometimes. At 63, with no income of my own, no employer who remembered my name, no career to return to, fear was the reasonable response. I gave it its due. Then I picked up my pen. I started writing down everything I could remember, every account number I'd ever seen, every discrepancy, every charge that hadn't made sense, every time money had moved and the explanation hadn't quite fit. I wrote for 2 hours. By the time the sky started to lighten, I had 3 pages. And a question that wouldn't leave me alone. Why was Warren so confident? Why had he already prepared documents? Why did a man who built his entire career on negotiation come to the table with a take-it-or-leave-it offer? Because he thought he was holding all the cards. But what if he'd been hiding some of them? I called Carol the next morning. She's sharp, my daughter. Inherited whatever practical gene I carry, skipped the one that makes women overlook things. I told her what had happened. There was a long silence, and then she said, very quietly, Mom, I saw him in Chattanooga in February. With a woman. I thought she was a client. What did she look like? Young. Maybe late 30s. They were having lunch at Moccasin Bend. He introduced her as a colleague. Another pause. Mom, he held the door for her the way he used to hold it for you. There it was. Carol, I said, I need you to not tell him we've spoken. Can you do that? Absolutely. And I need the name of a financial forensics person, not a divorce attorney yet, someone who looks at money. She found me one within 48 hours. A woman named Patricia Sohn, based in Chattanooga, quiet office on Market Street, the kind of place that doesn't have its name in big letters on the door. Carol had found her through a friend who'd used her during a business dispute. She's methodical, Carol said. She doesn't miss things. I paid for the first consultation with money from my personal household account, money I'd been managing for years. Patricia Sohn shook my hand, sat me down, and listened without interrupting for 40 minutes while I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then, you said you kept a notebook. I have it with me. She looked through it carefully. Her expression didn't change much, but her eyes sharpened at certain entries. Mrs. Caldwell, she said, your husband owns several commercial properties through his firm. But does he own any properties or entities independently? Anything registered outside of his employer? I thought about it. There was something. About 3 years ago, he mentioned setting up a separate LLC. He said it was for liability purposes. Consulting work on the side. Do you remember the name? I did. I'm a bookkeeper. I remembered it from a piece of mail I'd seen on his desk 2 winters ago. Ridgeline Advisory Group. Patricia Sohn's pen stopped moving. She looked up at me. Give me 2 weeks. I went home and became a very good actress. I cooked dinner. I asked Warren about his day. I was polite and quiet and gave every appearance of a woman who had accepted her situation and was simply waiting for the paperwork. He became visibly more relaxed, more comfortable. He stopped, leaving his phone face down. He underestimated me so thoroughly, it almost broke my heart. Almost. 13 days later, Patricia called. I need you to come in today. This afternoon, if you can. Her office felt smaller when I arrived. She spread documents across the conference table, the way you'd lay out evidence at a trial, which, as it turned out, was exactly what she was doing. Ridgeline Advisory Group was registered in Georgia 3.5 years ago, she said. It lists Warren as the sole owner. In the past 2 years, Ridgeline has received transfer payments from 3 of your husband's commercial real estate deals, payments structured to look like consulting fees. The amounts totaled just over $300,000. I sat very still. That money came out of deals that should have resulted in higher profit splits paid to his firm's clients and partners. Instead, it was redirected. The clients got reduced returns. Ridgeline got the difference. She paused. There's also this. She slid another page toward me. A property record. A condominium in East Ridge, Tennessee, a 15-minute drive from our house. Purchased 14 months ago under Ridgeline's name. Based on the utility registrations and the access records we pulled, someone has been living there regularly. I knew without asking. Can we prove all of this? I asked. We can document every transfer. The property records are public. The consulting fee structure will require a forensic accounting review. But yes, this is provable. She looked at me steadily. Mrs. Caldwell, if this goes to court, we're not just talking about divorce settlement. This is fraud. Potentially wire fraud. Given the interstate transactions, your husband could face criminal exposure. I understand. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the magnolia tree in our backyard. About the nights I'd spent alone in emergency rooms and school auditoriums and parent-teacher conferences, while Warren was out building the life he was now trying to take entirely for himself. Yes, I said. I've been prepared for a long time. I just didn't know it. That night, Warren came home and found me sitting in the living room. The divorce papers were on the coffee table in front of me. Ready to sign? He asked. He was almost cheerful. He thought this was already over. I have a question first, I said. What is Ridgeline Advisory Group? The cheerfulness left his face like water draining from a tub. He recovered quickly. 40 years in real estate teaches you to recover quickly, but not before I saw it. The flash of panic. The recalibration. It's a small business interest. Nothing related to the divorce. It's related to about $300,000 of money that should have belonged to other people, I said, and to a condominium in East Ridge that I assume isn't being used for business. He took a step toward me. Where did you get that information? I paid attention, I said. I've always paid attention, Warren. You just never thought it mattered. There was a long silence. Then his voice changed, dropped, became the voice he used in negotiations, low and precise, and not quite threatening. Evelyn, listen to me carefully. You don't want to do this. You don't understand what you're looking at. Sign the papers, take the support, and let this go. You'll be comfortable. You'll be fine. But if you start making accusations you can't back up, I can back them up. Another silence. Monger. You're making a serious mistake, he said. I've thought about that, I replied. I don't think so. He left the room. I heard the front door, his car in the driveway, then quiet. The next morning, I filed for divorce, not his terms, mine, with an attorney named Rachel Holt in downtown Chattanooga, who specialized in high-asset marital cases and had, according to Carol's research, never lost one. I also authorized Patricia Sohn to submit a formal complaint to the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance regarding the Ridgeline transactions and the affected real estate clients. Warren's attorney called before noon. Very smooth, very controlled. Mrs. Caldwell, I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot. My client would like to discuss a revised settlement. He's prepared to be considerably more generous. A pause. This doesn't have to go where it seems to be heading. Where does it seem to be heading? I asked. Another pause. Somewhere neither of you wants. Speak for yourself, I said pleasantly. I'm doing just fine. Rachel Holt called it exactly right when I relayed the conversation to her. They're scared, she said. The moment you filed that regulatory complaint, they lost control of the timeline. They can't settle the divorce quietly anymore without addressing the fraud, and they know it. 3 weeks later, Warren came back. Not with his attorney this time, just him, standing on the porch of the house he'd expected to keep, looking older than he had in March. I opened the door, but didn't step back to let him in. I just want to talk, he said. Privately, without the lawyers. There's nothing private between us anymore, Warren. Evelyn. His voice cracked slightly. 41 years. Whatever I've done, we have 41 years between us. Can we not at least sit down? I looked at him for a long moment. The man who had held my hand at both our children's births. The man who had also, apparently, been maintaining an entirely separate life 14 minutes from our front door. What do you want to say? I asked, without moving. He wanted to explain, he said. Her name, I later learned, was Andrea, had come into his professional life 2 years ago. He hadn't planned it. He knew that wasn't an excuse. He was willing to end it. He was willing to restructure the settlement. He just needed me to withdraw the regulatory complaint. That complaint isn't mine to withdraw anymore, I said. Once a formal allegation is filed with a regulatory body, it proceeds independently. Your attorney should have told you that. He hadn't known. I could see it on his face. He'd thought I was holding a card he could negotiate away. Warren, I said quietly, you planned this for years. You moved money. You bought property. You had documents drawn up before you ever sat down at our kitchen table. You did all of that while I was keeping your house and raising your children and being your partner in every way I knew how to be. I paused. I am sorry that you're in the position you're in. I genuinely am, but I didn't put you there. He left without another word. The hearing was on a Thursday morning in October, 6 months after that April kitchen table conversation. Chattanooga in October is beautiful, clear light, the mountains going orange, and I remember noticing that on the drive downtown and thinking that the world was indifferent to my situation, which was oddly comforting. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Warren sat with 2 attorneys. I sat with Rachel. Judge Annette Whitmore was 60 herself, precise and unhurried. With reading glasses she kept removing and replacing as she reviewed documents. She had the manner of someone who had heard every version of every story and was not going to be rushed by anyone. Patricia Sohn presented the financial findings first. She walked through the Ridgeline transfers methodically, with documentation for every transaction, every redirected payment, every affected client account. Warren's attorneys objected 3 times. Judge Whitmore sustained none of them. Then Rachel presented the property records for the East Ridge condominium, along with utility records showing consistent occupancy, and a lease agreement, signed by Warren, for a storage unit in the same complex that had been opened the same month he'd first mentioned temporary business shortfalls to me. He'd been planning to leave for at least 2 years. When Rachel asked Warren directly, under oath, about the purpose of Ridgeline Advisory Group, he said it was a legitimate consulting entity. When she placed the bank records in front of him showing client funds redirected to Ridgeline's accounts, he said the arrangements had been disclosed to relevant parties. When she asked him to name those parties, he couldn't. Judge Whitmore watched all of this with her reading glasses held loosely in one hand. Then Rachel called a witness I hadn't known about until the night before, one of the clients whose account had been affected by the Ridgeline redirections. A retired contractor named Philip Morse from Cleveland, Tennessee, who had invested in a commercial development through Warren's firm 4 years ago and received a return significantly below what his contract had stipulated. He'd never known why. He knew now. By the time Philip Morse finished testifying, Warren's lead attorney had the look of a man who wants to be somewhere, anywhere else. Your Honor, Rachel said, this case involves not simply the concealment of marital assets, but a sustained pattern of financial misconduct that predates the divorce filing by at least 3 years. The marital estate is substantially larger than Mr. Caldwell represented. We have documented evidence of approximately $340,000 redirected through Ridgeline exclusive of the East Ridge property, which is itself a marital asset regardless of how it was titled. Warren started to speak. His attorney put a hand on his arm. Judge Whitmore looked at him over her reading glasses. Mr. Caldwell, you will have an opportunity to respond. That opportunity will be more valuable if you wait for it. The preliminary ruling came that afternoon. All marital assets frozen pending full forensic audit. I retained possession of the Lookout Valley house. Temporary support of $4,500 monthly to begin immediately. Warren was ordered to produce all financial records for Ridgeline and any related entities within 30 days. As the session ended and people gathered their papers, Warren stood, and for a moment we were facing each other across the courtroom the way we'd faced each other across the kitchen table 6 months before. "I never thought you'd do this," he said. It wasn't angry, it was almost wondering. "I know," I said. "That was your mistake." Rachel took my arm as we walked out into the October afternoon. "You did well," she said. "You were very calm in there." "I've had practice," I said. The final hearing came 45 days later. In the time between, the regulatory complaint had moved forward on its own track. Warren's firm launched an internal investigation, and what they found was enough that they terminated his partnership. Quietly, quickly, the way firms do when they want to contain damage. 2 of the affected clients filed civil suits. The Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance referred the matter to federal investigators. By the time we were back in front of Judge Whitmore, Warren was facing federal scrutiny for wire fraud. Andrea had moved out of the East Ridge condo. I found that out because Carol told me, and I found out Carol knew because James had driven down from a conference in Atlanta specifically to check on me and had, in his methodical military way, driven past the address I'd given him just to know what we were dealing with. My children are something. The final ruling took Judge Whitmore less time to read than it had taken her to prepare it. The marital home, fully mine, mortgage satisfied from the asset division, 60% of all retirement and investment accounts, including those held under Ridgeline's name, which had been reclassified as marital property, monthly spousal support of $5,000 for 12 years or until I remarried. Warren to bear all legal fees, which had reached $92,000. Any attempt to transfer, hide, or dissipate the awarded assets to result in immediate contempt charges. And then, quietly but without hesitation, Mr. Caldwell, this court has found that you engaged in a systematic effort to defraud your spouse, your business partners, and your clients. The civil and criminal proceedings that will follow this ruling are outside my jurisdiction, but I want to state plainly that the evidence presented in this courtroom was damning. You had a wife who supported you in every meaningful sense of that word for 41 years, and you treated her contributions as invisible because they happened inside your home rather than on a balance sheet. This court does not share that assessment. Court adjourned. Warren didn't look at me when they called the session closed. He looked at the table. I looked at him one last time. Not with anger, not with satisfaction either, exactly. More like the feeling you'd get when a long illness finally breaks. The relief is real, but you're too tired to celebrate it right away. Outside on the courthouse steps, James had his arm around me before I'd finished coming through the door. Carol was crying a little, trying not to show it. Rachel was already on her phone. The October light was doing the same thing it had done 45 days before, clear and indifferent, and very beautiful. The federal indictment came 8 weeks later. Wire fraud, 3 counts. Tax evasion, 2 counts. Warren entered a plea agreement that included 18 months in federal prison and full restitution to his former clients. His name was in the Chattanooga Times Free Press on a Wednesday morning. I didn't read the article. I didn't need to. Here is what I did instead. I repainted the dining room. That room had been beige for 22 years because Warren thought color was too much. I painted it a deep, warm terracotta, and I stood in the middle of it with the paint smell still in the air and felt something unlock in my chest that I hadn't realized was locked. I called Philip Morse, the client from Cleveland who had testified. I thanked him. He said simply it was the right thing. We talked for 20 minutes about the development he'd invested in, about his grandchildren, about Tennessee and autumn. He was a decent man who'd been taken advantage of, and he deserved at least a phone call. I signed up for a watercolor class at the Chattanooga Art Center. I'd always wanted to. Warren had considered it a waste of time. In 4 months, I completed 2 paintings I'm genuinely proud of and made 3 friends, including a 70-year-old retired pharmacist named Gwen, who brings homemade lemon cake to every session and has the best laugh I've ever heard. I kept the house. I know some people expected me to sell it, to leave the memories behind. But I'd made that house. The magnolia in the backyard was mine. The kitchen I'd repainted 3 times, the garden I'd put in over 4 summers, the window seat in the upstairs hallway where I'd read to my children when they were small, those were mine. I wasn't leaving them to anyone. James came home for Christmas that first year. Carol brought her family. We ate in the terracotta dining room, and I made a roast I'd been experimenting with for weeks, and my granddaughter, she's 6, she's fearless, stood on her chair and announced that Grandma's house was the best place in the world. I thought, yes, it is. There are things I want to say to anyone listening who might recognize something in this story. Financial invisibility inside a marriage is real. It happens slowly, over years, through 1,000 small arrangements that seem practical at the time. He handles the business accounts. She manages the household. He earns it, she spends it. And then one day you discover that the law doesn't automatically account for what you contributed if you weren't the one signing the checks. Know what you own. Know whose name is on it. Keep your own records. Not because you expect the worst, but because you deserve to know what you've built. I also want to say this. It is never too late to fight. I was 63 years old and had no income and hadn't worked outside our home in 38 years. I was scared every single day of that process. Every day. But scared is not the same as helpless. Scared is just what it feels like to do something hard. Last spring, I drove past the East Reach condo. I don't know why exactly. Not to torture myself. Just something I needed to see. It looked exactly like every other unit in the complex. Beige exterior, a potted plant on the balcony that someone had kept alive, a parking spot with a different car in it now. Just a building, just a place. On the way home, I stopped at a nursery and bought 3 rose bushes for the back garden. Climbing roses, the kind that need something to hold on to, that'll grow over the fence by summer if you let them. I planted them that afternoon with my good gardening gloves on and the radio going in the kitchen through the back window. Warren gets out of federal prison next spring. I've heard through Carol that he's living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Cleveland, not Tennessee, Ohio, and working part-time for a property management company. He's been paying the support which is garnished before he ever sees it. He'll be paying it until he's 82 years old. I don't wish him ill. I mean that plainly, not performatively. I spent a long time being married to him. Some of it was good. He is the father of my children and the grandfather of my grandchildren, and that will be true regardless of anything else. But I also don't carry him with me anymore. He made his choices and he lives in them, and I live here. In my house. In my terracotta dining room. In the garden I planted. This past July, Gwen from my watercolor class organized a trip, 8 of us, women between 61 and 78, a long weekend in Asheville, North Carolina. We rented a house, we visited galleries, we ate very well, we laughed until my sides hurt at a storytelling event we stumbled into on Saturday night. I drove home on a Sunday afternoon to the mountains with the windows down, and I thought, this is mine. This exact moment, these mountains, this ordinary Sunday, mine. I hadn't felt that way in a very long time. So that's the story I needed to tell. A 63-year-old woman who had been invisible for so long she'd started to believe it herself, until the moment she stopped, who discovered that everything she'd been told didn't count. The years, the work, the attention, the care, turned out to count for quite a lot when she decided to say so. I'm not the woman who sat at that kitchen table in April anymore. I'm not sure I could be, even if I tried. What would you have done? Would you have signed those papers? Would you have let the fear win, the way I nearly did? I'd love to know. Leave me a comment, share this with someone who might need to hear it, and wherever you're listening from tonight, I hope you know your worth. This is Hannah. Thank you for being here. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in any grand philosophical way, just the plain, quiet kind of thinking you do when you're out in the garden with your hands in the soil and nobody needs anything from you, the way one thing leads to another, the way choices accumulate. Warren made his choices over years. He didn't arrive at fraud in a single moment. He arrived there through 100 smaller decisions, to redirect a payment here, to open an LLC there, to let himself believe that what I contributed didn't count because it didn't show up on a ledger. Each small choice made the next one easier. That's how it works. You don't wake up one morning deciding to deceive everyone who trusted you. You wake up having already become the person who does. And I made my choices too. I chose to pay attention even when no one expected me to. I chose to keep my notebook. I chose to sit with the fear instead of letting it make decisions for me. Those choices accumulated just like his did, just in a different direction. What I know now, that I didn't fully understand sitting at that kitchen table in April, is that intelligence isn't only what you study or earn a degree in. It's what you do with what you notice. I noticed things for 41 years. I filed them away. I kept records not because I suspected Warren, but because careful attention was simply who I was. And when the moment came that I needed everything I'd ever paid attention to, it was there. Every number, every discrepancy, every entry in a notebook that Warren had never once glanced at. That's what I want to say about wisdom. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like wisdom when you're doing it. It just feels like being thorough, being present, caring enough about your own life to watch it carefully. And the courage part, because people ask me sometimes how I wasn't more afraid. I was afraid. Every single day of that process, I was afraid. Afraid of the legal system, afraid of Warren's resources, afraid of being 63 years old and starting over with nothing. But I learned something about fear during those months. It doesn't go away when you act. You act alongside it. You make the phone call while your hands are shaking. You walk into the attorney's office while your stomach is in knots. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's just refusing to let fear be the one making the decisions. Carol and James showed me something about integrity without meaning to. They didn't hesitate. They didn't weigh their loyalty to their father against their loyalty to the truth. They just showed up. Carol with research and referrals, James driving down from Atlanta to quietly check on things. They'd learned somewhere that being a decent person means showing up when it's inconvenient. I'd like to think I had something to do with teaching them that, though I'm not entirely sure I knew I was teaching it at the time. The terracotta dining room is still my favorite room in the house. It shouldn't matter. It's paint. But every time I sit in there, I think about the fact that I chose it. After 41 years of beige because someone else had opinions about color, I chose it. And that small, ordinary, completely trivial choice feels like something. That's the ending I want to leave you with. Not the courtroom. Not the verdict. Just a woman in a room she painted herself, eating dinner she made herself, in a house she fought for and kept. It's enough. It's more than enough. It's everything.